everybody's joined, which is great. So we'll kick off. And today we're going to be looking at website must-haves for venues and businesses as well, wedding businesses, if you're online, any photographers or suppliers. But yeah, we're going to be going through the things that you need to think about on your website. If you haven't looked at it for a while, now's the time to kind of do that before, December hits and loads of couples are looking at your profile on Bridebook and your website. And we see that kind of peak in inquiries. So the time is now to get this sorted. If you want to take a picture of your setup, if you're sat there with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or even your lunch, do tag Bridebook Business and Kelly Chandler Consulting on Instagram, and tag us on LinkedIn if you'd like to. We'd love to see your setups, and obviously we'll repost you as well if you do that. And if you're shy, then don't worry too much. So my third webinar with the beautiful Kelly Chandler. I'm so happy to have you with us today. I'm Dorothy. I work for Bridebook. Really nice to see you all, and I'll hand over to Kelly to intro herself if you don't know her, and those of you that know her can sit tight for a sec.
Brilliant. Thank you for the lovely intro, Dorothy. And yeah, this is our third session. It's always good fun to be here, and I hope we're going to have some good fun over the next hour with some useful learnings and insights and what have you. So yeah, it's great to be here, and I recognise lots of lovely names and venues. I can't see faces, but I can imagine some of your faces. Those of you I don't know as well. Really warm welcome. I'm Kelly Chandler, wedding venue consultant and trainer. I support special wedding places and spaces to thrive in the wedding market, however that may be. Some of you will know me from a focus on sort of marketing, sales, wedding product development, all sorts of consulting to do with the wedding journey. So yeah, it's great to be here shining a light today on as the seasons are sort of changing. I'm very aware that lots of you will still be incredibly busy. I know September is a really popular wedding month, and 2022 obviously exceptionally busy. So I know that perhaps getting to the website has not been the greatest priority over the last few months. So not here to make you feel bad that you haven't been looking at your website. More, it's a positive. Let's kind of try and turn our attention to this over the next couple of months, as Dorothy said, to get ready for the end of the year and engagement season. So I hope you will find it useful. And yeah, back to Dorothy.
Amazing. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much. So we're just going to give you a quick overview of what we'll cover. We're going to cover 7 key areas. So tech basics, blogging and SEO. We won't go into too much detail on these things, but obviously it's important for your website. Making life easy for couples, which is so important. Showcasing your spaces, introducing your team, pricing, and your call to action. So these are kind of the 7 areas we're going to look at, and I'm sure that Kelly's going to impart some really great knowledge for us as well in each of these sections. So I'll hand over to Kelly. We know why, on a baseline level, why our website is so important. I think all businesses know, but I think, just give us an overview of why it is so key now and why we should be turning our attention to it.
Yeah, so it might sound like an obvious one. I think most of us do recognise the importance of a website, but hands up, and I'll put my hand up here first. Sometimes we forget that we kind of forget that it's there, or rather we don't look at it that often. It's there running in the background, and it is really important it's important that we do look at it and we do keep it doing the best that it can, because for most of you, it's your shop window. I'm very aware there's lots of different styles and types of venues here. Some of you may be open to the public, some of you may be visitor attractions, or you may otherwise be open that people do come into your venue. But for a lot of you, for a good portion of you, actually, you are otherwise closed. So in particular, your website is your shop, if you like. Again, that's not new news, but we want our shop window to look appealing, particularly to that passing customer. And at the end of the day, wedding customers are passing customers because they are there for a very short spell of time, a very short window of time, really, and you want to grab their attention in the best possible way. Some of you as well may well, for most of you, your website is kind of, or the wedding part of your website is there to entice people so that they want to come in and see you in person. For most of you, that will be your sort of motivation for your website. I am aware though there are some venues, particularly more intimate venues, that will completely sell from their website and will actually book weddings directly. So yeah, lots of potential from websites. So getting it right is important.
Absolutely. And it's obviously right at the beginning of that journey, isn't it, Kelly? You know, it's likely to be one of the first places that couples land. And so to have it, you know, with all the right information, looking beautiful is so important in that conversion journey. Just saying that, this is the kind of venue decision process. They view 15 venues digitally, usually 28 reviews and contact 7 venues. The stages that I've in light blue here are kind of the areas where your website is really key in narrowing the journey down and the decision down for your course. So yeah, just to frame kind of the end-to-end journey and why website and where website is so important within that journey. So we're going to move on to our first section, which is website tech basics. And so I will hand over to Kelly on this one.
Great. So yeah, hands up if you're like, oh no, web tech, we're not covering this, are we? Okay, it might not be your absolute passion and your go-to, but I imagine that most of you will have some kind of support within how your website runs. But really important to just pay attention to some of these basics. I say we're not going into huge detail on this, but first things first, mobile. 92% of couples use their mobile for wedding planning. Huge numbers. Whilst they might use desktop for some things, mobile for other, the reality is you need to make absolutely sure that your website is looking really good. I know, you know, for many of you, you will have this sorted, but just pay attention to it. Make sure that you check how your website is looking and those pages of your website. Sometimes when you make updates, you know, things don't always quite reflect how perhaps you've intended. So make a good look to check that things are looking really smart on mobile, even if your go-to is desktop, which sometimes I make that mistake because I look at desktop because that's how I work mainly in my office. But actually, my clients might be using mobile. So always think about what they're seeing rather than what you're seeing. That's my first tip. Making sure with your, you know, with images that you're using, particularly on your website, that you ultimately the things are running at good speed, that you're not loading up ridiculously large images, and that, you know, things are slick and happening. You know, we've all got increasingly short attention spans. I read something the other day about how actually I think we're supposed to have less memory than a goldfish now, humans. I think it's like 8 seconds or something like that to remember things. It was quite a scary thing I read, that we're all turned into goldfish. But the point I'm making is we have very short attention spans. So when somebody goes to your website, they want to see it straight away. If it's not loading within, you know, a couple of seconds, they're off. So you want to make sure that that, you know, it's as punchy as it can be. I think Dorothy might have frozen on us actually. I'm hoping that you can still hear me okay. Perhaps let me know if you're not. I will look out for the Q&A. I think Dorothy might have frozen there. Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. My internet actually just packed up, and so I'm really sorry. I'm now back, so I'm just going to reshare my screen. My apologies.
Dorothy. I wasn't sure if people were still hearing me or if.
I'm so sorry. We honestly, these days it's just technology issue. Honestly, so let me just. That's actually never happened to me before, so I did have a slight panic.
Yeah, well, apparently I did carry on and people could hear me, so it's only the slides that we're missing.
Fantastic. So there we go. You've seen the back end now of our magic. Thank you for staying with us. Please carry on, Kelly, and hopefully my internet won't be so dodgy for the rest of the week. I was very worried that was going to happen, but you know, these things happen and we roll.
Exactly. And we were just talking about, you know, internet speeds and being quick and punchy, you know.
There we go. I promise all my tabs are closed, so I don't know why it happened, but hey, we carry on.
Some things are outside of our control. However, we can do what we can with the website. Sometimes internet connections out of our control, but we can control our website. So we talked mobile, we talked about making sure image sizing is website optimized and your pages are loading as quickly as they possibly can. The next thing to think about is clear navigation. So just paying attention to what you're calling your items at the top of the menu bar. Now, I know for some of you who are not, let's say, dedicated wedding venues, that can be particularly challenging. You know, I know for some of you, even getting the word wedding on the homepage can be a challenge. So obviously, I appreciate it is relative, but if you do have carte blanche of your navigation, make sure that it is nice and clear what it is. You know, if it's pricing, call it pricing. You know, if it's gallery, call it, you know, use the kind of terms that people will recognize. If it is, you know, I quite like, you know, wedding nitty gritty. If it is the details, if it is the kind of ins and outs, call it the nitty gritty. Most people understand that, you know. So make sure that you've got those key aspects in your navigation. And then final sort of website basic, tech basics, have immediately, you want the visual impact. You know, as I've said, you're often dealing with people that are looking at your website for the first time. You want to give that very best impression, and you know, picture says 1,000 words. I know it's a cliche, but it's absolutely true. You know, how often do you go to a website and immediately, whether it's branding, whether it's photography, it's normally those things before you've even had a chance to look at the text that either excites you and thinks, oh yeah, I've landed in the right place, or puts you off. So very best impression that you can. And, you know, for those of you who can't have a huge big image of a wedding or of a couple on the homepage, some kind of, you know, really impactful visual that absolutely screams wedding. For me, it is generally a couple dressed in wedding attire that kind of does that better than any other image. Although, of course, some of you will have, you know, venue backdrop with couple as an amazing kind of entry visual. There's lots of ways you can take it, but showing off your best, that initial key page or key page is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I would say, hopefully you can hear me, but one thing I would say is to also have a little look at some of your competition and what are they doing on their websites, and is there anything that you can take from, you know, the navigation or any little ideas that they have to kind of either change and make your own and implement and things like that. So, you know, having a look at other venue websites and other business websites is also a great way to go to have a look at these kind of tech basics. So we will move on to our second area, which is SEO, search engine optimization. We're just going to do a very high level here. You know, some of you on the call may even know, probably will know more than us, but we're going to try our best to just talk about why this is so important. Kelly, would you like to take us through?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, actually earlier this morning, I was just talking to an SEO lady who runs an SEO company, and yeah, we were just having a very, you know, broad conversation about it. But fundamentally, you know, SEO is a long-term strategy. It's not necessarily, you know, a quick win when you start off on SEO, but it's just super important because it's there operating and building your authority. Your keyword, obviously it's all about your keywords, but fundamentally you want to be making sure that your website is building reputation, is building your presence on Google over time. So you want to pay attention to the keywords, the ones that are, you know, best to target for your particular venue. I think we've mentioned Google Trends here is a useful tool to get started. You can build a bank of terms people are searching for that relate to your venue. I'm a really big fan of blogging for venues. I know when I get to consult one-to-one with lots of clients, I'm always saying to my venues, start a blog, start writing, because building your SEO through your content, for me, one of the easiest ways to do that, rather than through more static web pages that don't change very much, is to blog, is to write on what's happening in your venue. Does take some time if you're doing it yourself. Some of you may well be able to outsource some of that, but it does take some time. But things like your real weddings can be a fairly low effort, in that you've got the content there, and if you're using some of those real weddings with the right keywords, that can really help your authority, building your Google rankings, as well as I see the other benefit, not just SEO, but actually a blog could be really effective in building trust with your clients and reassuring them that you're experts and you know what you're doing, and that you know, that goes beyond your more sales-led website pages, which don't change so much. So that's just a very quick why pay attention to SEO, a very high level. There's a lot more that to it, and there's a lot more that Dorothy and I are not experts at, as you said.
One thing I will say is that we do have a team of marketers at Bridebook who are absolute experts at this, and they obviously are doing a lot of work in terms of SEO to make sure that couples are going onto the Bridebook app within your counties, the types of like venues that you are, their budget, all these kind of keyword search terms Bridebook are really hot on. So we do part of that hard work for you, but obviously it always benefits you to do some of your own on your blog, as Kelly said, and yeah, build that kind of credibility too. And SEO is a long game. You know, you're not going to make changes today and see them next week. You're going to make changes now and see them in 6 months and see yourself kind of creeping and climbing. But it really is beneficial. So don't be discouraged if it's not having an immediate impact, because it's kind of a long game, but really, really important. So thank you, Kelly, for giving us that overview. The next thing that I just wanted to make you aware of is that if you're a Venue Pro partner, we have a bunch of new features coming, which I'm really excited about. But the one that I wanted to just chat to you quickly about was Couple Intel. And this is just one part of Couple Intel that is going to be launching. And so it gives you some insight into when kind of the couples that have favorited you, the couples that have inquired to you, if they've booked you, what they're searching for, and you can kind of look through and see, okay, what are the terms that couples seem to be finding me through? And hopefully this will help to kind of educate the rest of your marketing strategy. And it's just going to give you a bunch of insight on who you're losing business to, the average number of venues that a couple is inquired to, and loads of great stuff that will hopefully inform your marketing strategy and also how you build up your profile on Bridebook. So really excited about this new tool. And yeah, if any of you are wanting to see it demoed or anything like that, then do get in touch with us. It'll be launching this month. Woohoo! So obviously a massive part of any part of our business, let alone the website, is making life easier for couples. So we've got a couple of slides on this, and Kelly, do you want to kick us off with, you know, why this is so important and what to do?
Yeah, I think yeah, it's thinking, you know, back to the website pages. It's thinking, okay, you've got somebody who's a first-time visitor to your website. Bear in mind, in most cases, they won't have set foot in your venue, hotel, you know, before. So they want to know kind of what you are. However they've landed on your website. You want to make it nice and quick and easy for them to see, in summary, what you're all about. So I think really important to make sure you've got those really key points, your USPs about what you are. So example, you know, your exclusive use rustic wedding venue based in Wiltshire. You know, I still see a lot of websites that aren't actually clear where a venue might be, and geography is clearly really important for most people when it comes to finding a wedding venue. Yes, some people travel out of area, of course they do, but most of us want to know where when it comes to a physical place. So really spelling that out, spelling out style. So if you're, you know, vineyard wedding venue, you know, really important point. Accommodation, really spelling that out, because a lot of people are looking for, you know, the overnight, whether it's the weekend wedding, looking for accommodations. If that's one of your USPs, really spelling that out on your homepage, on your key sort of wedding page, right from the off, without making that difficult to find. I know when Dorothy and I were prepping a little bit for this session, I was also sharing one of my frustrations with sometimes not being able to find capacity on venues. As someone who's been a former wedding planner looking for venues for couples, I always wanted to know what's the maximum guest number at this venue, because, you know, frankly, I know I've got 120 guests. If you can only fit AC in your main, you know, banqueting suite, it's not going to work. So that's something I think, you know, key facts as quickly and easily as possible is my advice. And keeping text down to, you know, a sort of minimizing it as much as possible. I think most of us get off put by too much text. It's kind of known really that we read less and less, and, you know, imagery is increasingly important versus text. So just being very mindful not to sort of overwhelm, sort of more go with less, with a click through to lead them onto a journey, rather than too much in one block. As I say, for some of you this might be intuitive and may well be something that you're doing, but sometimes we have a tendency to add to websites and add and never subtract. So yeah, that may be something you might think, yeah, we're quite good at keeping it short, but when you go back and realize that you've added things on, it might need an edit over the winter. So
yeah, I completely agree. And I think sometimes there's a temptation to add, you know, a big paragraph explaining, you know, how guests can move through the venue and et cetera, when really visuals are just as impactful. And this is the first time, maybe, or second or third, that couples have done this, usually first. So, you know, they probably don't want to be bombarded with loads of information that they're, you know, having to make sense of in their own kind of experience. And so yeah, I think minimizing it and making sure that they just have those ways of contacting you, so that they can find out more than just the key parts. One thing I will mention as well is the UK wedding report, which hopefully all of you have read, and if you haven't, I will include it in the follow-up email to this, but it has a slide in there that has all of the key types of information about venues that couples look for when they're making a decision. And so I will send that to you afterwards, but I think that having those kind of top 5 key pieces of information on your website, really visible and really easy to find, is super important. So that's a good indicator as well of what couples are looking for. If you'd like to carry on, Kelly.
Yes. Okay, so more ways to kind of make life easier for your couples, including those frequently asked questions or good to knows, where you compile those sort of questions that couples often ask with some quick answers. I think this is useful at all stages of the journey. I know when I work with some of my clients of, you know, perhaps at more of the planning stage, you know, you'll repeatedly ask the same sort of questions. So I think having FAQs, you know, whether it's in, you know, predominantly we're talking about your website here for the sales process, but a lot of FAQs can be useful at whatever stage. So having that available is really good. Really important, I would say, to make sure that your website has some up-to-date testimonials, kind words, examples of real people and real weddings and the real things that they are saying about working with you. Definitely builds that credibility and puts the weddings into some kind of context. In particular, given the last couple of years and you know, the pandemic and everything that has kind of entailed for us, those amazing testimonials from couples that you have you know, postponed and worked with and nurtured and kind of lived through quite a spell with, you know, I know, because I see some amazing testimonials on my sort of, you know, social media feeds and what have you. Really important to share those. I always think the marker of a good business is when things are tough. How do you look after couples? And I think, you know, people are looking for those kind of testimonials rather than, you know, just it was all great in 2019, which, you know, I think that's something to pay attention to. You know, as you update things. So another way of making life easier for couples, and this might land with some of you, it might not with some others of you, is including your availability dates on your website. Now, it's not everyone's cup of tea, and it's a subject I have lots of conversations with clients about, but from a customer point of view, in terms of making it easier, to be able to be in control of seeing what your options are at a venue on a particular season, a particular date, and to see kind of where your options might lie literally from a website, I think can be a really positive thing. It's not necessarily right for all venues, but maybe something to explore. It certainly gives couples a bit more control and understanding of their budget, particularly if availability is tied into pricing, and they can be in control of their planning, which I think most of us know. Couples increasingly want to play about with what they're doing and look at being in control of their options. So
yeah, it's we were discussing it, weren't we, Kelly? And we were like, it's not right for all venues, but I've seen some really successful venue websites out there where it's there. And as a user, I was like, oh, this is so useful. Like I can see straight away. And actually, I think there's a temptation from a business point of view to think that volume of inquiries and leads is the success indicator, but actually it's quality a lot of the time. And if you've got a smaller team, then making sure that you're enhancing that qualification process of, is this couple going to be a good fit for my venue, and will this venue be a good fit for this couple, is really key to make sure that you're managing your time effectively, and that you're able to reply to those inquiries, and that they're actually hopefully going to be lucrative. So although you may think, oh, that's really scary to put my dates on the website, it may actually end up positively impacting your business in the long run. So one food for thought, isn't it, Kelly?
Yeah, exactly.
So next section, really, really important, showcasing your spaces. So I'll hand back to Kelly.
Yeah, so I'm really, really passionate about this subject. I think because I do quite a lot of work looking at venue websites, and so yeah, I mean, the important thing to always bear in mind in looking at your website or the pages of your website is your couple has very likely never set foot inside your venue. So they are looking at your website to tell them the journey, and the journey not just of their wedding experience of planning, but the journey of their wedding day. So logistically presenting your spaces. And actually, when it works well, it can be really effective. So and actually I've seen some great examples where people do this really well, particularly those venues that are perhaps serve a destination market and actually take bookings for, let's say, elopement weddings, where actually couples don't come in for a show round and a viewing. So actually the website does really have to work hard. So, but what I'm saying is, for all of you, whether you do elopement weddings or not, or smaller weddings, actually really pay attention to how you can showcase your spaces and make it really easy for a client, for someone to kind of imagine their day or their weekend or their whatever you're offering in a logical way, so walking them through. So from my point of view, I love to see almost the flow of the day. So from, if it's getting ready, I want to see images of that getting ready space. I want to see ceremony images. I then want to see, let's say, drinks reception, wedding meal, and then I want to see evening party. And I kind of want to see it in a logical flow that allows me to envisage literally walking through the venue. And I know it can be slightly easier said than done. I know it can be complicated when you've got multiple spaces, but interpreting that in different ways to show them the journey of their day is, I think, really important. Of course, it's using, again, the sort of point about text versus imagery. For some of us, our go-to is to write, and I get that. I'm definitely a writer rather than a photo taker. I'm definitely no photographer. but photos just make it, for most people, really obvious, and particularly when you can showcase those dressed spaces. I would say don't make people's imaginations work too hard. I think, you know, many of you will know, because you're face to face with couples a lot of the time, you do really need to help them with how it can look, you know, bearing in mind they've never seen your, you know, great hall transfer, you know, dressed for a wedding. They can't necessarily envisage it. And even more challenging if you're, you know, if you're an outside space and you know, there's some kind of structure build or anything, it can be really hard for people that don't work in this to kind of imagine. So making sure that you show things really dressed in the use that they would be, you know, so if it is a ceremony space, show it set for a ceremony, show it from the back of the aisle, show it from that kind of view walking down the aisle, you know, that sort of thing. Or I always like images from above. So whether it's, you know, from a gallery, seeing the whole room from above, loving drone footage, always love drone footage. I just think it really sets the scene, particularly if you are a venue with grounds and, you know, impressive sort of surrounds. I think drone footage can be amazing. So, and as it says here on the slide, making sure that you don't fall into the trap of only showing summer weddings. Unless if you only do summer weddings, then show summer weddings. But if you are a year-round venue, a lot of us fall into the category of kind of forgetting to showcase the seasons sometimes, and it can be more challenging to get the imagery in the winter for sure, but if you want to sell winter, you have to show winter.
Yeah, and there's so many couples that love winter and want that kind of cozy wedding vibes. Capturing that in a visual format is a really lovely way to show it. Thank you so much, Kelly. Some wonderful tips there in terms of showcasing your spaces. I've just got an example here. You know, neither image is wrong. It's the beautiful Hedsa house, which is very close to our heart at Bridebook. One is their beautiful ballroom when it's not dressed for a wedding, and the other one is their beautiful ballroom when it is dressed for a wedding. And you can obviously see the impact of when a space is dressed versus not dressed. I can assure you on their website, all the spaces are dressed and beautiful, but this is just a nice example of kind of more bare versus the way that it would be set out for a dinner reception. So yeah, really, you know, impactful and beautiful to include. So just an example of imagery there. And then also looking at a spring wedding versus a winter wedding. This is the beautiful Cripps barn from Cripps & Co in at the Cotswolds. And, you know, spring and winter, obviously I don't think they would be shown side by side in kind of this stark contrast. They would probably be in separate galleries or spaced out throughout like a gallery list. But you can see that actually how cozy and beautiful that winter wedding looks, and how lovely and fresh the spring wedding looks. And obviously the couple looking for that particular type of wedding, one of these images will speak to them, but they would have no idea what, you know, winter would look like if you didn't showcase it this way. So really nice examples there from those venues of how to kind of showcase spaces and present spaces with lovely imagery. Back to you, Kelly.
Yeah, okay, this is another one of my what am I going to say, passionate points I like to make. Introing your team on your website. As much as showing your lovely spaces and walking your couple through, you know, the journey of their day, and maybe looking at menus and food and drinks and all those kind of things, I would encourage you to take a look at how you're talking about your team, how you're talking about service, how you're talking about you and the people that are behind the wedding. For me, and I'm not a bride, I know, I was, but a long time ago. I always want to know when I'm potentially looking to buy from a business, certainly something that's quite valuable. I want to know who I'm working with. Maybe it's the owner of the company, but maybe it's the team and who's going to be working with me on an event and a project as special as a wedding. I think a really strong about presence is really important, and to see your team, whether it's introducing individuals on bios or whether you can manage a team photo. I know, you know, it can be challenging. I know many people don't like having their photo taken, but I just think it goes such a long way to starting off a good relationship, to letting people see that, you know, who's behind the bricks and mortar, and that they are going to be well looked after, you know, backing up those testimonials and all those other things. I think it can also help enormously if you think, you know, people are looking at your website, they're making an inquiry, the intention is that they will come in for a viewing. You know, if they've seen your face, it can just make that rapport building a little bit more comfortable, and can help a little bit later down the sales process as well. So yeah, I like to see some quite fun about pages and team pages and behind the scenes. I think, well, I know from stats that people like it.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. And Kelly's own website, actually, although obviously it is Kelly is a Kelly rather than a huge team, but you've got a lot of images on your website and information about you, Kelly, and it's a really lovely journey of introducing yourself to whoever's viewing. So actually check out Kelly's website too, because it's a great example. But this is the lovely team from Old Walls Collection, which is a collection of 3 venues in Wales, and I just loved it because all happy smiling faces, lots of different people, and just really nice to see, you know, the people looking after you on your special day. So yeah, thank you for that, Kelly.
And seeing, I mean, look at, you know, so many people involved there on that team photo, you know.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it can go a long way to realizing it's not just, you know, a wedding and an event. It's a huge team effort, and how many people are working on that can be really good from a, you know, when we start thinking about pricing and, you know, how it all happens, you know, and, you know, justifying what goes into a wedding.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Like, no, like obviously seeing the value in the number of people and effort and time that's being put into this, yeah, justifying it becomes easier, hopefully, to do that. Yeah, 100%. All the big one, we had so many questions about pricing, and if you have got a question about pricing, if it's not answered during kind of our chat here, please put it in the Q&A, because I know it's like a massive topic that venues and businesses kind of think about. To price or not to price? Go for it, Kelly.
Exactly. Well, I think everyone has a price, although of course I know that's the subject of much conversation at the moment in terms of where pricing needs to be, but we often have a different view on how available that pricing is. Now my view, and I share it quite widely, is that I believe in 2022 for most wedding venues, pricing needs to be more easily available. I would say available on the website for the majority of venues, making it easy for that customer to find. You know, this is perhaps different from a few years ago, but couples increasingly are doing so much research in advance of raising their hands and saying we're here, and we know that from lots of studies and surveys, you know, the Bride Book report being one of them. Couples are doing so much research that they want to be empowered, they want to know their pricing, and they want to know what their pricing gets them, and be in control of that decision-making process as to, you know, do they look at an off-peak date on a such and such a date? Do they look at midweek? And actually having pricing available to them without them having to ask, without them having to give you data, I believe is the way that it is best to be for most venues at this particular point in time. You know, people are increasingly hesitant to share data and give email addresses, even to download things, you know, and certainly putting them through a complicated inquiry process can sometimes lose them. So I think transparency is really important, and you know, empowering them with what that pricing is, even if it is guide pricing, even if it is from pricing. I know is something I have lots of conversations with my clients about. You know, it's not always straightforward. Our pricing is variable. We like to have conversations with people because we want to gauge, you know, there's lots of factors. I get you on all of that, but I think having some kind of guide, some kind of example pricing, or a small number of example pricings based on a typical wedding, whether it's, 50 guests on a winter Saturday, or whether it's 120 guests on a summer midweek, if those are sort of, if those are kind of representative, give them some example pricings if it can't be a fixed pricing. So
yeah, I completely agree with that, Kelly. And it's I feel as though, if I were a couple getting married, I'm not yet, but hopefully one day, I say that on every webinar, I would actually feel a bit embarrassed to inquire for pricing if your imagery and your videos were so beautiful, and obviously the way that they should be. I may actually think that you could be out of my budget, and I might not want to inquire because I might feel, oh, I've just bought a house, things aren't quite as flush as I'd like them to be. What if they're too expensive for me and I just look silly for even thinking I could afford it? You just want to take that anxiety away from couples as much as possible. And if you're transparent with them, then they're just going to feel like I can make the decision, like you said, Kelly, empowering them to make that decision. And it's not you putting your, neck on the line. It's just giving them the information that they need to make a decision of how they're going to spend this big lump of cash. So yeah, I completely agree. Super important to have it in some form, whether it's, a sliding scale, or whether it's seasonal, or whether it's packaged, or however your pricing strategy works. But yeah, great advice. Anything else to add on that, Kelly?
No, I think we've covered it. It may well be there are some questions on that as we move on. I know it's it's a big topic, and particularly at the moment, I know a lot of people are looking at pricing, particularly with the inflationary aspect to it. So yeah,
fab, thank you. Probably aside from pricing, the biggest thing on any kind of marketing collateral, but especially your website, the call to action, or call to actions plural. Go for it, Kelly.
Yeah, so this is our sort of seventh point before we move on to questions, our last point. Ultimately, it's just worth remembering, what do you want couples to do from your website? And the reason I ask this is sometimes what I see on websites is not necessarily the direct answer to this. And I would just recommend you take a look at your website when you get to sort of doing that, and just make sure that you've got it loud and clear on your website what the very next thing you want them to do is. Now, for most of you, that is book a show round, book a viewing, whatever you call it. So make sure that you're letting people know how they can do that, and that you've got the relevant, whether it's a click button or a link, or a calendar, whatever you've got that allows them to do it. I'm really a fan of allowing people to book in for a viewing using an online calendar. The likes of Calendly is an online calendar I use for my own meetings, but there are many others. Again, it's empowering couples to be then and there thinking, right, let's look at our diary when they're together, normally 2 of them coming in at least. When can we make booking it in? It's done and dusted. I know that sometimes can mean a bit of juggling and a few logistical challenges your end as venues to not necessarily be in control of that communication via email. However, I think, again, it's that speed, it's efficiency, and it's the kind of automation that can also help with show rounds, and certainly help minimize some of those no-shows and things like that can be a factor as well. But I think with call to action, just worth having a look that you are pushing people to show round, and whether you've got any other call to actions that really don't need to be there. So what I mean by that is sometimes we see make an inquiry or download a brochure, which is fine if you really do want them to download a brochure. But if your brochure doesn't actually say anything different to your website, actually, do you really want them to download a brochure, or do you actually want them to book in a viewing? Now, I would just challenge that, as I say, if you're automatically pushing people to just download a brochure, you're holding them back potentially, whereas actually booking viewing is progressing them along. I'm not saying not to have a brochure, but perhaps it doesn't need to have as much presence. And again, the inquiry one is quite interesting. Actually, if you do have pricing on your website, if you do have an availability calendar, and if they are able to book in for a show round, actually, what is the inquiry? So that's just one to think about. Maybe ask a question. Ask a question might be a better sort of, if I can understand people have questions, they may not want to book in for a viewing until they've perhaps asked something that isn't available on your website. But sometimes I just sort of want to challenge the assumption of send an inquiry. It's almost like, well, do we want the inquiry? Do we actually want them to move to a show round? So yeah,
it's definitely yeah, for sure, it's food for thought. Like, I know that we all kind of are conditioned into thinking that like send an inquiry is like the go-to call to action, but the only reason that a couple's going to send an inquiry is because they have questions about your venue. And if you're providing them with the right information on your website about your venue, then they shouldn't actually have that many questions. But if they do, I think ask a question is a really great way, and include, they can put their email address on that, obviously, so that you can reply. You can capture their data, but that might actually be more of a direct way of getting them to interact with you than send an inquiry. And obviously the show round is ultimately, so many of you venues tell us that you convert when people meet you in person and they see the venue. That is the clinch moment. So I think I completely agree with you, Kelly, and really interesting to think about how you can do that on your own website. And Candice has said here that this was the best bit of advice I got from you on another webinar you did. It works great. We have it on the website, and also send out the link on email inquiries to book in for a show round. So it's obviously thinking about how we can use it from the end-to-end journey with couples. And clearly it works for you, Candice. Which venue are you from? If you can pop that in, that would be amazing to know. But thank you for that feedback. Fabulous. So a couple of you have left some questions that Kelly is going to rattle through in the last 15 minutes or 10 minutes now. So this was a question asked, do you have any thoughts on what proportion, if any, of images should be artsy and or romantic special moments, but don't particularly show off the venue, compared to images that do show off the venue?
Yeah, great question. I would say roughly 80-20, focus on, I think, it depends what we mean by artsy and romantic, of course, but, I think we need to have some people images on a wedding venue website, on any kind of wedding business website. We need to have people, because people add character and feeling and emotion and all of those kind of things. And sometimes, when you see somewhere that is just sort of things and places, it can lack a little bit of emotion. However, what I would say is, if you are showing images of people, of couples, with an eye on a new customer, that new customer doesn't know that couple, doesn't know those people, and actually they're more interested in seeing your venue. So I think, 20% people, if you like, and showing that sort of, the ambiance of your venue, but, 80% showing the features of what that couple might be getting. So whether it is, I mentioned earlier, kind of, view of the room, like, you showed the picture of Hedsel there, for example, Dorothy, whether it is that kind of, from on high, views of the room, views of the ceremony, people want to imagine themselves in it much more. So that would be the big focus, 80% on that, rather than, the little up close shot of the flowers on the table might be beautiful, but actually, a little bit of that. I'm not saying no to that, but yeah, 10-20% would be my view.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, I do love seeing some close-up shots on Instagram when I'm looking through people's profiles, but when I go to a venue's website, I want to see the full picture, the whole package of all of the suppliers coming together and making it into a beautiful space, rather than, you're not trying to sell a florist's services right now. You're trying to obviously get a couple to your venue, so showing the full impact is really, really important. So great advice there. The next one I can probably answer, what are the most important USPs couples are looking for in a venue? Obviously your unique selling points are yours, so I don't think couples are specifically looking for a unique selling point, but we know that the most important pieces of information that they look for is, you know, pricing, photos of the interior and photos of the exterior. We can also, you know, follow up with the wedding report, which does have a lot more information on what couples are looking for. And then obviously, if you have a Venue Pro account with Bridebook, you can start seeing the types of information that couples are finding you through. What are they searching? So you can then nail down your unique selling points that are resonating with couples. So I think that it very much comes from you and how couples find you rather than what couples are looking for. I don't know if you'd agree, Kelly, but that's my take on that question.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? I mean, what the most important USPs couples are looking for is very individual, because, you know, all of you are targeting different clients with a different client profile. You know, so it's a difficult question to answer. But, you know, I suppose, you know, there are certain things that obviously crop up. You know, a lot of people, I do find, increasingly are looking for accommodation with a wedding. That's certainly something that generally is on the up. Although, you know, again, it depends on your location. That's less so if you're an urban wedding venue that there's, you know, oodles of accommodation. That's probably more relevant to a rural setting. So yeah, I think that's a that's a hard one to get too specific on, really.
Yeah, definitely. And then this third question is, how would you best present pricing on your website that is still easily accessible and still gains the inquiring contact information? I feel like we've already answered this during this webinar, in that pricing shouldn't necessarily be gated, and those other call to actions of ask a question or booking for a show round are a better way of getting that contact information than gating your prices. We have just had a question through, which is actually almost the same as this top one. So Christina from Dragon Hall has asked, any tips for making your wedding hire page stand out when your venue is part of a larger organization and weddings aren't necessarily the primary focus? For example, arts and heritage venues. So the top one, a hotel or a museum or a heritage venue. How do you do it, Kelly, with less realty space? How,
Yeah.
you know, it's difficult.
It is difficult. It is. And you know, obviously it depends on what space you have got to play with. But if you know, I think if you've got, you know, if you're able to get a wedding related image on, you know, on one of those key spaces, then fantastic. But whatever your navigation is, whatever the click through is to weddings or to private hire or whatever you're able to make it, you want that very first image to stand out. I would say a video if you can, because of course if you can get a thumbnail that is a video, a short clip video, you know, that is going to showcase a lot more. If that is a, you know, if that is a walkthrough, or if that is a, you know, a short clip from a you know, from a wedding, that's going to showcase a lot in a short space of time if you don't have, you know, space for full galleries and what have you. I mean, it kind of depends what space you've got to play with, but I think being really obvious as well, you know, I mean, I completely appreciate not all weddings are bride and groom, of course, but ultimately a white dress, a bride in a white dress and a groom tends to be an image that will, at least if you're looking to stand out on a, you know, on a website that is otherwise about other things, that is going to catch the attention. You know, obviously I'd love to see there be other types of weddings showcased, but I think if you've got limited space, that's probably the thing to focus on, rather than, you know, let's say flowers set up in your venue space, which could be any kind of event. Does that help a little bit?
I mean, I personally totally get what you're saying, Christina. I'm sure that you have had these kind of back and forth with the central marketing team. When I used to work for Merlin Events, we really needed realty space on, for example, the London Eye website, because we did small weddings on there, and just like corporate event space at Madame Tussauds. And having a really good relationship with the central marketing team that looked after the attractions was key in making sure that they understood the value that we can bring with weddings or with events, and also making sure that we actually got a decent space, whether it was a banner once a month or whether it was a proper landing page that at least gave us the capability to have a gallery. So I think definitely fighting a little bit for realty space and making sure that you have a decent place on that website is really important. And then, as Kelly said, making sure that the imagery screams weddings, yeah, is top advice. I've just had a question from Joanna. What does gating your prices mean? Sorry, that was a bit of jargon there, but what I meant by that was having your prices behind a form that couples have to fill in order to download it, or they have to get in contact with you in order to download it. So some kind of transaction has to take place in order for them to get prices, which just makes the process quite a bit longer for them. And like I said earlier, they might be a bit embarrassed to inquire if they think it's out of their budget, maybe. We are a group of multiple venues. How do I make the couple journey easy from the start? Kelly.
Okay, so I think what the question is meaning is that you've got, you know, one website representing a number of different venues, perhaps with different styles. So I guess with this, it would be very clearly distinguishing your venues. Let's say I'm imagining, you know, that you might have 6 venues or something, and they've all got slightly different target clients. You know, let's say one of them is a, you know, an outdoor, you know, outdoor woodland setting, another is a bit more heritagey. You know, you want to, I would have it with those, again, with imagery, with kind of thumbnails from the thumbnail, you know, key large, as large as you can get them, format images on your entry page, your home page, the page you're driving people to with your marketing, and actually spell out with that, you know, what is the absolute USP of that venue, and then direct people off. So if it is, you know, rustic outdoor, you know, teepee tent, then, you know, image of that and click them off to that, and then, you know, customer journey for that client. And then the same for perhaps someone looking for a bit more historic, and that might be simplifying it, but, you know, distinguishing your venues and pushing people off from that early point, but also allowing them obviously to come back, because as we know, people don't always necessarily know exactly what they're looking for. So you don't want to, you know, you want them to be able to look at all of them. So yeah, that's where the navigation kind of, so they can click back between, that would be my immediate answer to that.
Yeah, amazing. And obviously you said earlier, Kelly, about having those, like that short phrase that encapsulates what that venue is about. Obviously you can use that to your advantage when you have multiple venues and encapsulate each venue with their unique selling points or what makes them special. So that's really great advice. Our pricing is quite bespoke. How do I be transparent on the website?
Yeah, we sort of touched upon this a little bit with pricing, but and it's, you know, it's really common amongst lots of you that, you know, you don't just have one price, and it is quite bespoke. You know, if you're not in a position that you can give a sort of pricing grid, if you like, then I think it's giving example pricing. So, you know, pick a typical wedding, you know, what is a typical wedding? If it's 100 guests, if it's a summer Saturday, you know, give them a guide quotation for that. You know, you can say that it's a guide, you know, for budgeting purposes, it's not fixed in stone. So it is a guide, but give them some example of pricing, or a from price. I'm just a little bit careful with from prices, because people tend to put, you know, their cheapest January midweek, you know, and that isn't necessarily representative of what their real pricing is. And I think that can be misleading and disappointing further down the line. So I think, again, the more transparent you can be to give an example pricing of what it is for this, without being too specific, is probably the best approach. Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Kelly. So if any of you aren't already on Venue Pro and you want to hear more about some of the features and kind of ways that you can connect with couples on Bridebook that I mentioned earlier, and if you just want to explore the platform in general, we're always happy to help you out and show you around. So yeah, it's just a little hello, and we'd love to chat to you if you're not already on it from me. Here are some of our beautiful Venue Pro partners, and we love them all very much. But yeah, do get in contact if you'd like to chat. And I will be sending you a recording of this webinar afterwards. Do ignore the technical difficulty in the middle, but we carried on, didn't we, Kelly? But just a massive thank you for joining us, and please do put in the Q&A just a yes if you've learned something new today. You know, any feedback is really important for us as we do these webinars moving forward. And it would be great to hear from you if you learned something new today, or something that you're going to implement for your own venue. And yeah, thank you for joining. We'll also send you the UK wedding report afterwards, because I think there's a lot of really useful data in there, isn't there, Kelly, that can apply to your website and your marketing mix. And if you also have asked for tips from Kelly in the future via email, you'll be getting those as well in the next few weeks. So that's really exciting.
Thank you. Good stuff. I look forward to seeing some of you again in some format. So thanks for being here today. It's been lovely to be part of it, Dorothy. And yeah, good luck.
Thank you so much, Kelly. It's always an absolute joy, and I hope everyone goes and has a fantastic afternoon and has a little look at their website and thinks about some of these things that we've been talking about. So thank you, Kelly, and have a fab afternoon all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.